Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. On behalf of the African Development Bank, let me first convey my warm greetings to you all present in today's event taking place in New York on the margins of the 2024 High-Level Political Forum. I would also like to express our deepest gratitude and appreciation to our fellow African institutions, including the African Union Commission, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, as well as the United Nations Development Programme, for the great collaboration on the development of the 2024 Africa Sustainable Development Report. The focus of this year's report on progress and prospect on the implementation of Agenda 2063 and the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development in Africa is really timely, as the window for achieving these goals is narrowing due to many factors, including climate change, which poses significant risk to development and sustainability in Africa. Indeed, climate change poses a great challenge to the recovery of African economies at the aftermath of COVID-19 and following multiple shocks in the world. While Africa accounts just for 4% of annual global carbon emissions, the continent bears a disproportionate share of the negative effects, with 9 of the 10 world's most vulnerable countries to climate change located in sub-Saharan Africa, and with the continent projected to lose about $50 billion per year by 2030 due to climate change. Yet, Africa received just 3% of global climate finance. As of the $1.3 trillion climate finance mobilized globally in 2022, Sub-Saharan Africa received only $30 billion. In this regard, access to available, accessible, and affordable climate financing remains a key challenge for Africa to effectively implement its climate action commitments under the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. It is estimated that Africa will need between 1.3 trillion and 1.6 trillion by 2030 to achieve its nationally determined contributions. This means that the global climate finance architecture falls extremely short in meeting Africa's climate action needs. Looking at this situation, what can be done by an institution like the African Development Bank to accelerate access to climate finance for Africa? At the bank, our climate finance agenda is embedded into our 5 development priorities called High 5, which we are actively implementing in synergy with the Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These are Light Up and Empower Africa, Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. As indicated by an independent review by the United Nations Development Programme, if Africa achieves these high 5s, it will achieve 90% of the Sustainable Development Goals and 90% of the Agenda 2063. So we view the high 5 at the African Development Bank as the accelerator of Africa's development. Over the last 9 years, this ambitious development program has impacted the lives of more than 400 million people in the continent. To accelerate climate finance mobilization in Africa, the bank committed to allocate at least 40% of its annual investment as climate finance, and to double its climate finance to reach $25 billion by 2025, while helping Africa grow its climate finance rate from the current 3% to 10% by 2030. To date, the bank has made considerable efforts in providing its own resources as climate finance, with $5.8 billion provided last year, representing 55% of our annual lending, following 45% in 2022 and 41% in 2021. This was both the highest annual share and the highest volume of climate finance in a year by the bank to date. Furthermore, the bank has achieved and even surpassed its target of ensuring parity between mitigation finance and adaptation finance, adaptation being Africa's top priority on climate change. Over the past 3 years, the bank significantly increased its share of adaptation finance, with 67%, 63%, and 53% of its climate finance allocated to adaptation in 2021, 2022, and 2023 respectively. Let me also stress that while actively implementing our climate commitments, we are also championing a range of flagship programs to accelerate Africa's access to climate finance. For instance, we are currently implementing together with the Global Center on Adaptation, the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, called AAP, the world's largest adaptation program, to mobilize about $25 billion for scaling up climate adaptation action in Africa. In addition, the bank, through its flagship program on technologies for African agricultural transformation, TAT, provided access to improved climate-resilient agriculture technologies for about 12 million farmers in just 2 years in several countries, such as Ethiopia. This program is supporting the delivery of heat-tolerant wheat varieties for farmers to rapidly boost wheat production in Africa. On mitigation, the bank is implementing the Desert to Power program, a $20 billion program with the goal of providing electricity for 250 million people across 11 countries in the Sahel. When completed, the Desert to Power will become the largest solar zone in the world. This program builds on existing successful programs of the bank, such as the 510 megawatt Nur Ouarzazate in Morocco, which is the world's largest concentrated solar power plant, which reduces 762,000 tons of CO2 per year, or 19 million tons over the 25 years project life cycle. And of course, the 310 megawatt Lake Turkana project in Kenya, which is the largest wind power plant in Africa. To help achieve green low carbon development in Africa, the bank is also strongly supporting the expansion of renewable energy. Over the past 7 years, under the Light Up and Power Africa priority, we have connected an additional 21 million people to electricity. Today, over 87% of our investment in energy generation since 2016 is on renewable energy. However, we cannot achieve net zero emissions with zero financing. African countries need significant financial resources to deliver on their just energy transition plans. And it is important to mention here that Africa cannot be powered only by renewable energy technologies due to their intermittency. Natural gas may remain a transitional fuel and a critical part of the energy mix for Africa to ensure reliability, affordability, and security of energy supply. The bank is also investing in Africa's biggest asset, the youth. The bank's Job for Youth in Africa strategy set the goal of creating 25 million jobs for the youth by 2025. So far, we helped to create 12.1 million direct and indirect jobs for the youth in Africa. At this juncture, let me stress the importance of partnership in accelerating the deployment of climate finance in Africa. In this regard, over the recent years, the bank has strengthened collaborations with global climate finance players such as the Green Climate Fund, the Climate Investment Fund, and the Global Environment Facility, through which we have mobilized roughly $4 billion in co-financing, including $679 million from the GCF, the Green Climate Fund. We have also joined forces with Canada to establish the Canada AFDB Climate Fund. With the UK, we have obtained a $2 billion guarantee to free up an additional space to increase climate finance. Let me conclude by highlighting the progress being made under a new initiative launched last year. This is the Climate Action Window, which was created in response to calls for reforms of the global finance architecture. This new and innovative instrument is established under the 60th replenishment of the African Development Fund with the aim to mobilize between 4 billion to 13 billion US dollars as climate finance for the low income and most climate vulnerable countries in Africa. With 429 million US dollars seed funding from Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, we are now financing a range of adaptation and mitigation projects in the 37 ADF countries while providing them with the technical assistance needed to meet their climate action goals. These are just few examples of what the bank is doing to address climate change and support SDGs in Africa. Let me close here by stating that despite the progress made, more efforts need to be done in mobilizing climate finance at speed and at scale for Africa, including by attracting private sector in climate and green opportunities which have immense returns on investment, such as green infrastructure, renewable energy, carbon markets, just to name a few. I thank you very much for your attention.